Welcome to the Voice of Houston. I'm your host, Bobby Mills, and the co-host, Dr. Clara Brent, is not with us today, but we have a very special guest with us. We have the Honorable Perry Wooten, former Constable from Precinct 7 in southeast, basically, Houston. Perry is a longtime law enforcement officer, 28 years with the Harris County Department of Sheriff's Department of Protecting Our Citizens, and worked under longtime Sheriff Claiborne Hagan and others, and really was the inspiration behind the Black Sheriffs, Police Sheriffs kind of league and so forth. Welcome to the show, Perry.
Thank you.
Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
You're looking good.
It's a blessing. Thank you.
It's a blessing.
It's a blessing to be here today.
Well, you've written a book.
Yes.
That relates to your own professional policing experience and the encounter that you had with the structure of policing itself, law enforcement, and you were a long-time law enforcement officer, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Tell us, you've written a book, From Hell to Glory, and it's from your own professional and personal experience. Tell us what motivated you to write this book, and what is it that you want people who are willing to purchase the book and read the book and share it with others? What is it that you want them to know about you as a law enforcement officer, about the profession itself, and how you feel changes need to occur within the system?
Well, thank you, Reverend, for having me in here today. It's a truly blessing.
It's a blessing.
It's a blessing to be here, I tell you. Well, first of all, this book, the name of the book is From Hell to Glory. And the reason why that I was laying in the bed one night, and God gave me that topic. And I asked the Lord to give me the topic, what he wanted me to have. And he gave me From Hell to Glory, which was totally appropriate for me. And From Hell to Glory is something, let me give you a little background, is that I was a first president of the first black police union, Sheriff Department Police Union, in the history of the state of Texas, the Afro-American Sheriff Deputies League. And it's that back in that time, when we came aboard, there was no blacks in the Harris County Sheriff Department. The few that was there
in the
administration are deputy sheriffs. The few that was there, a part of it. The few that was there, they worked inside the jail. They wouldn't allow blacks to work on patrol, warrants, narcotics, and burglary and theft, all the prestigious positions. Matter of fact, they had only one black sergeant when I was there, and one captain. They were appointed. And everybody, all the other blacks, men and women, Hispanics also, worked the jail. I remember when I first came in, we went to roll call. And when I went to roll call, the sergeant went through his spiel. Then he stood up and he said, well, let's go clean up them niggas off of Homestead. Right in the middle of roll call.
He used derogatory terms.
Niggas in Homestead. So I stood up. I said, what? I said, that's totally inappropriate, Sergeant. I'm offended by that. And then he looked at me like I was crazy. So, but I told him I am offended by that. And so
he thought at that particular time you were an uppity end.
I was uppity. And so, so obviously he felt this privilege that he had been saying that all along and got away with that. No one called him out.
None of the other officers
that called him out.
Who would challenge.
When I originally got there, they was on the loudspeakers talking about niggers and Mexicans on the loudspeakers in the jail. They were having Ku Klux Klan affidavits and signatures on the tables, and you had to walk around and look at it. So, I said, hey, man, this dog can't hunt. I can't take this. And so I immediately, the after sheriff's deputy was there, but the brothers at that time was kind of scared to stand up. And so, I came in, was hired.
So let me put this in here. So you're saying if you were black at that time, you had to have wanted a job pretty bad in order to be a sheriff deputy.
You had a high tolerance.
Because of what you had to endure.
You had to have a high tolerance.
Yeah. No, you had to want a job real bad.
For abuse.
To be dehumanized in that manner.
And so, but law enforcement itself, you have to remember, the soul of law enforcement is influenced by the so-called blue code. That's the code that's between law enforcement officers and between each other, that they cover each other back. They take up for each other. From hell to high water, they take up for each other. They stand there with it. And whether they're right or wrong, you're always right. I was a professional law enforcement officer for over 28 years, serving all various levels in the sheriff department, and found that in the end I become the second black elected constable in Harris County, Precinct 7. I was also the first black DA investigator in Harris County. And from that time on, then I was the first black administrative aide to the sheriff before I became president. And that's when I had to give up all that. They didn't want me there after I become president of the police union because the stance that I took and the things that I had to call in question. Well, law enforcement you have to remember, law enforcement was originally designed to bring back runaway slaves. It was formed for that. To bring back
because the slave was defined as property.
Slave was defined as property, and they had to have a mechanism in order to go get the slaves. So they brought about, it was formed, they brought about and bring about law enforcement to go back when they gave them badges so they can go off all over the different countries, different states in order to bring them back the slaves.
So you're saying that the law enforcement constabulary, whether it was police officers, sheriff deputies, constables, or what have you, it was solely designed to protect the property
of the slave master.
Of white males.
White males and slave masters, period.
And blacks were defined as being the property
of
whites.
A white master. And so that's why they went on out and brought about law enforcement, because at the one point, once they ran out and got away, they were going away. But so they formed this organization, law enforcement, which gave them the authority to go across county lines and bring them back. That's what law enforcement really was all about in the first place. And so what's happened? Law enforcement. There's a need for law enforcement, even in a civil society, because there's sometimes you have to have law enforcement because there's some individuals that are not capable are dealing with, are operating in self-control. So you can tell that even today, you need law enforcement today in order to make sure that they have control the violence within our community, especially in our community.
But you need law enforcement with justice.
Law enforcement with justice. And the day is that law enforcement today is, and we're talking about, when they were saying about people was talking about law enforcement this. But what we need is law enforcement. We need to have African Americans at the head of law enforcement. African Americans that their mindset level are about going in, protected, serving and protect. That's the mantra of law enforcement, is for serve and protect. Not going out being Gestapo type things, killing people and shooting them down and all this kind of thing. That's
like
not
what we saw in the George Floyd situation.
Like we saw in George Floyd incident and all this thing. When I saw this guy got on the young man's neck and put his foot on his neck, I automatically knew that was wrong right there. That was wrong. I had all my years in law enforcement, I have never saw anybody put their foot on somebody's neck, and I could tell when he had his hand in his pockets and with his knee down on his neck, he was just grinding. Then I knew what his mindset was. He wanted to do some harm to the man.
No, not do some harm, kill him.
Well, he did that. He did. And I knew that he was guilty. First degree murder. And so, but those type of things, but see the thing is, but had that been a black man, did that to a white man, then he wouldn't even have to have a trial for him. He'd have been gone. They wouldn't have took through the process of giving him a trial. So, but the thing is, by that time, to follow up again, well, then the sheriff department, we was having all these type of things, but blacks couldn't have work in certain areas, blacks couldn't had no supervisory levels. And I remember when I used to come into the jail in the morning, I worked a 73 shift, and I walk in on the gladiator floor, we call it the gladiator, the 10th floor. And I walked in, I saw young 17, 18-year-old black males, men, hanging out the cell block, crying and bleeding. And they were saying, boss, man, I'm so glad you're in. I'm so glad it's daylight. They beat us up, boss. They beat us up. And it was so bad, I brought tears to my eyes. So I went down to the sergeant's office and I said, Sergeant, until we have a honky beat down night, you better not never have another nigga beat down night in this jail, because I'm going to have all y'all indicted. And that's when it took off. And for some reason, I had to think about that. So now,
that's when you started operating outside the blue code.
I started the blue code.
You had problems.
I had problems. That's when my problems began. But somehow, what I thought I went there, because I was all state football player and all this kind of stuff. They brought me there for PR. They ride around in the car, show around. This is nigga. We got Negroes in the house.
So you saying you didn't want to be no jailhouse Negro?
Yeah. I was just gonna ride around in the car, and let them see me riding around the car. They're gonna say we got a black man out here riding in the car. You see how inclusive we are.
Showcase Negro.
Yeah, see how inclusive we are. and so when I got to start talking like that. It all started,
you was on the S list.
It all started coming to an end.
You was on the S list.
That's right. And so, at that time, thank God we had an Afro-American Sheriff's Deputies League, in which I become president. So I started recruiting other blacks to join. And I started talking about getting joined. And thank God, Craig Washington was a congressman at that time. And I talked to Congressman Washington and got him.
He was a state rep, wasn't he, at that time?
Yeah, state rep.
Yeah, he was a state rep.
I got him to go out and carry a bill.
Craig was a lawyer.
That's right, carry a bill.
So he understood the law.
Right. He carried a bill for us in order for us to formulate a police union. And Craig carried the bill in Austin. And
God bless Craig.
God bless Craig. And got the bill passed, and we was able to formulate the first black police union in Harris County, or state of Texas. And for that time, that time we started paying the dues. Sometimes the brothers didn't want to join us because they were
scared to lose their job.
Yeah, but I was walking on the floor to floor, calling them out.
And you were trying to say to them at that particular time, which is more important to you, the job or your human dignity?
And are we going to be men or are you going to be boys? When you going to stand up? What were you willing to stand up for yourself or for your children? That sooner or later, if you don't stand up, then sooner or later they'll become one of your sons will be in here. And they be having nigga beat down night. He might be part of the niggas that get beat down.
No, not your son. You might be in there because you.
well, that too.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to put it where he can touch him a little bit.
Right.
But get away from him.
With the children.
Yeah, with his children. And so finally we got it going. We got it going on and started taking in dues and pretty soon the sheriff didn't like it. Cleveland Hagen, a redneck, biggest redneck I ever seen in my life.
I remember Cleveland.
And talk about that wasn't a black man in our whole sheriff department qualified to be part of his administrative staff. So sheriff, now they're black in the whole black, all the black, and we have got about 800 blacks, and you tell us we don't have not one qualified sheriff, and you a Democrat, the black folk voted to put you in. Oh, no, he didn't like that. He didn't like that. So what happened was, even at that time, I still felt reluctant. So I prayed, and somehow God gave me put the spirit in me.
And the strength of character.
That this is what he wanted. This was my destiny. This is what he wanted me to do. It wasn't about what I wanted to do, but was I going to be obedient to take that stand? That was my time, and this was that point in time that he had designated for me to take the helm and trust in him. And so that's what I did. And so I started with dues, and I started getting the brothers. We started going out in the communities, walking the neighborhoods, patrolling the neighborhoods, and bringing back the school zones and getting in the school zone, patrolling the school zone, making sure the dope dealers went around, and we did things in the community. I remember back in the 90s when the Democratic Party came into town. We came in and we protested. We picketed the Democratic Party. All the big mayor and Jesse Jackson and all the Mickey Leland, they went across the picket line. They said, no, we can't cross the picket line. These brothers out there protesting. We got to work this out. So finally we stayed there and picket. So Mickey and Craig and all those boys wouldn't come across the picket line. And so, Jesse Jackson, none of them. So finally, they called me up and asked me, what can we do to resolve this? I said, well, you can how you can resolve it. You come and stand up with us and tackle the issues that we're talking about for the racism and discrimination, how law enforcement is being used as a tool to beat up and kill black folks. We don't have the representation in this community, and black represent 30% of Harris County, the city of Houston, at that time. And I'm saying, and therefore, and there's no blacks in administrative staff, there's no blacks on patrol, detective, warrant, things that historically we go out and pick up black folks. There's no one out to make a decision out there. So
you couldn't arrest whites.
You couldn't arrest white folks. You couldn't.
In other words, you couldn't enforce the law.
You couldn't enforce the law except what.
The only thing you could do was arrest black folks.
Black folks.
Not enforce the law.
Not enforce the law.
Because the law was supposed to be universal.
Universal.
To break the law regardless of your skin tone.
Supposed to be able to arrest anybody that is opposite of the law.
Right.
And so, but the fact is, but that wasn't the case. So finally, after the end, I got to sit. So I got out and got together a lawsuit and filed a lawsuit against Harris County Sheriff Department and Harris County. In 1986, we filed a lawsuit, and on the basis of discrimination, racism, and all those type of deals. And then also included the inmates abuse. So went on from that point in time until 1998. The federal courts came back and awarded us with a victory. And we won the lawsuit. Within that lawsuit, they had to promote all the blacks within all parts of the sheriff department, patrol, warrants, all those type of different deals. And Hispanics.
And especially administrative level.
And then they had to make sure that they had started promoting African Americans. But within that lawsuit, it gave the inmates the right to file grievances against the deputies.
For abuse.
For abuse. And that's why now, within right now the day where you got inmates that are able to get up and file lawsuits and call out what's going on, the only way they can do that is came out that lawsuit. Out of that lawsuit. They got the right to do that. That lawsuit went out. And I made sure that they got that right. I put that part in that lawsuit. And because one thing about, because you never know, my son could have been in jail. Or my daughter could have been in jail. And you can abuse them. But like I said, if you can't, I was not prepared for them to go around and beat up black kids, black men and women, children. But yet and still, you try and bring white kids out and put them in the office and give them a cup of coffee and call their parents to come pick them up.
If they violated the law.
Yeah, they violated the law. And so I had a problem with that. So in other words, but also too, I knew what that was going to do. They used to tell me, take me home, follow me home, tap my phones, do all kinds of things they could do to me. And finally, but I was intimidated by them because I knew I couldn't go to clubs. I couldn't do any of those deals because I knew if they ever caught me with something, a taste of alcohol, I'm going to jail.
Let alone drugs.
No drugs. I couldn't.
Marijuana or something. You've been gone.
I had to walk the straight and narrow, just like that. And so what I'm saying is that, see, people think that what's going on now.
So that made you not want to even drink, even to this day, huh?
I don't drink. I've never been a big drinker anyway. Never been a big drinker. But that's the way. The thing is, even to this day, well, law enforcement is only got a step farther. They got to allow us to work in this and allow more blacks to be in law enforcement. No black chiefs of police and assistant chiefs and all that. But yet and still, the deal is still to be second-class citizens. And the thing is that what they do is that they want to put white boys in the black community and police our community. But even today, you don't have black officers policing the white community. You don't see black policemen in River Oaks or Memorial. You never see any of those because they don't want them there. But they're white boys that come over into our communities and really police us.
So you're trying to say to us that policing is color coordinated.
Oh, yeah. It's geared.
And there's color coordination
to
going
control
on
and
even in the 21st century.
It's geared to target African Americans. It's geared for that. Just like the drugs, marijuana. They turn around and they give them almost a felony for marijuana. And which is you and everyone, I know, and everyone, they come in white boy, they throw that away and let them go. The judge won't even take them into court on it. And see, the thing is that when I see I see all the brothers out there marching and protesting. And I'm saying, but you need to have police. You need to have police, regardless. I know, but you got, if you don't have a police, you're gonna have an uncivilized society. Because right now people are killing each other, shooting down each other, people doing all kind of things, especially in our community. Because we're not being, because right now, because that's where the white people feel that's what we should be. Now you couldn't take that same thing that's happening in Third Ward or Sunnyside and try to go in the River Oaks and do that. I guarantee you would stay there 2 minutes. You would last 2 minutes there. And the thing is that you wouldn't have black people in River Oaks. You couldn't go stand on the corner and sell dope. You couldn't go in there and sit and drink liquor on the corners. You couldn't do the thing that you do in our community, or go by the stores and sit out on the stores in front of people, intimidate people coming in, drinking liquor and all that. You couldn't do that. But they allow that kind of stuff to go in our community. And they come in and they don't come in, they don't want to try to police our community.
Well, let me ask you a question that I think is germane to this conversation. 30 or 40 years ago, we had a stronger sense of community in the black community because our churches and our pastoral leaders and so forth, they operated totally different from the way we operate today in the 21st century. See, usually when I grew up, your pastor lived in the community.
Yes, that's right.
Because most churches had a parsonage attached to the church. And so the pastor didn't live in some affluent community far away from you. So we have in our community today mega black churches where the pastors, they are living in River Oaks and Woodlands and everywhere apart, and they just come in and preach on a Sunday.
Right.
And they're not a part of the community. So a lot of the shifts that have taken place, they're not just because of the mentality and the structure of law enforcement and the way white people operate in relationship to black people in general. It is also part and parcel of the way we have devolved and allowed our institutions, especially the church, and the way we deal with one another. Because in many instances, and we're dealing with each other the same way white folk deal with us.
And that's the mentality. That's the mentality was there. Black police officers, they get in run roughshod in our
protecting
community,
their job,
protecting their community, doing what they think the white man wants them to do. But you
in
can
order to
take
keep
that
the job.
same Gestapo stuff and go over to River Oaks and go rough up them white boys like that. You won't have a job. You go out there and tag
you
them
would
and
not
pull
only you lose your life.
You would lose your life. You would have no job. You wouldn't have no job. You go pull the white folks over and talk about if you're driving with a beer and you get over and talk about a beer, they don't want to pull you over. They'll get out. You wind up getting rolled up trying to get right them up.
We're talking with Perry Wooten, who is a 28-year law enforcement official, both as a law enforcement officer and an administrator. And we're talking about his book, From Hell to Glory, that was written out of his own personal experiences, not only in terms of enforcing the law, but being a criminal defendant.
Being a victim of it.
In the judiciary system itself.
That's right.
So what motivated you to really want to write this book?
That's the point. What motivated me was it wasn't about I wanted to write this book. That's what I'm saying about the magnificence of the thing of God. I didn't.
So you're saying it was divine inspiration?
It was divine inspiration. The whole process was how I even come in the jail. how I come to be the sheriff department. I have a background in business administration.
How you became a law enforcement officer. Period.
How I came there.
How you were recruited into the profession.
How I was cultivated. That's just destiny. What God has for you, it has for you. And if you allow God to use you, then He's going to use you. God will put you where He wants you to be, if you allow Him to do that.
So, the first thing you want people to know, if they're willing to purchase and read the book From Hell to Glory, you want them to understand the structure of law enforcement in terms of what it is designed to do.
What the structure of law enforcement.
And what it is not designed
what it's designed to do, basically what it's designed to do is basically.
And also what it's not designed to do.
It was formulated in the beginning to bring back runaway slaves. That's what it was formulated for, runaway slaves. And they had to have a tool that they allowed them to go across boundaries legally and go get them.
State boundaries.
That's right, state boundaries to go get them. And so the blue
So they had to define a slave as property.
As property. The slave was their property. And so the fact
not a human being.
Not a human being. Black folks was not a human being. So they could do whatever they want to do to black people and justify it.
Well, the second thing then, what is it that you want people to know once they read your book?
Second thing is, you realize, I wanted them to know, that God is able.
We're talking about in relationship to law enforcement.
Law enforcement, in reference to law enforcement, I know, is that law enforcement is designed to protect white folks.
All right, we have established that it's designed to protect white people and their property.
But black folks have not have a place in law enforcement. The only place that black folks have is incarceration part of it. Incarcerated.
Because that's the money generation.
That's the money generation, and that's how they keep us in check. Yeah. That's how they make sure they keep letting us know our position and who we are. That they allow them to say we belong to them.
Because the threat is always there that you could be incarcerated
50 years
for
later,
25 years, 30 years for a simple crime.
And the thing is that I want them to know that what I'm talking to them about now is what our great-grandfathers used to have go through. The same thing that their grandfathers went through. My grandfathers went through. So we haven't really arrived for its law enforcement. There's still the same vehicles that they have in place today. The killing, the lynching, and all the things that's going on is still there. What we're talking about today is not 1945, 1930. This happened in 1980s and 90s.
No, it happened also.
And it's happening now. It's happening in 2000, and 2020, 2021.
Yeah, it happened
so it's
with
still happening.
It happened with George Floyd.
So when I see him talking about George Floyd, them on the deal, all that do is have tears in my eyes. We haven't arrived. We haven't arrived. It's the same thing. They have the same way they're victimizing black people because we are not. They think we are still their property. We're still their property, and I want them to know that some black people, we got to be able to stand up and fight. We got to stand up and we got to take a stand. And God showed me that I could take a stand. And if God be for you, who could be against you? And so what I'm saying to me is that when I got out and took that stand, I allowed God to use me. And for that purpose, and I believed that God was with me. And so I'm saying, when you're in that jailhouse, you're out on these streets, you can't beat the man. If they do it to me, which I'm part of the law enforcement, I'm not with them, sitting behind them, what you gonna think they do to my son? my grandson, my sisters, my daughters, and all that on the street. They're still doing that. They don't stand a chance. So the point is that we have to continue to fight. We can never give up. But the point will have to happen is the brothers that's in law enforcement got to take more of a prolific stand. They got to stand up. They got to take on the battle. They got to do from the inside outside. They got to stand up and start a fighting. You can't just go on and be passive with the white man. You got to stand. You there with them. They can't afford to not have you there because they get money for having black folks there. They get money for the inner city. They get thousands and thousands of dollars to patrol the inner city. But when they get that money, they go to River Oaks and Memorial. They don't use that for our communities. So what I'm saying is that the ones in law enforcement today got to take a stand. They got to stand up and quit worrying about what they going to do and stand up and fight back. They got to get up and fight for the people, their children, and their children's children. Today they're not fighting back. Now they're not taking stands. They're standing back, letting it go on and keeping their head down. They're keeping their head down.
Well, also, we have to recognize that even with what's going on in the Senate currently, where the Republicans who were negotiating with the Democrats in relationship to the current Policing Reform Act, the one thing that they say, the Republicans that is, that was holding up the passage of the bill is qualified immunity.
Qualified immunity.
Now, we know what that means.
That's right.
I can do anything I want to do to you because I'm a police officer, and I cannot be brought into a court of law and tried for violating your civil rights or your human rights.
First thing they teach you, when you go to the academy, when you walk in the academy, the first thing they teach you is better to be tried by 12 and carried by 6. So in other words,
you know what that means.
You know what that means. Kill them.
Yeah.
And so if you kill them, then
you stand a better chance.
And one story told. That's what they teach you in the academy. You kill them, and you try by 12 and carry by 6. In other words, you shoot them, and your story going to be told. And so therefore, that's why they all go out and come out here and they gun ho. That's the brainwashing that they teach the officers. But they're not talking about shooting white folks. They're not talking about shooting their mamas and daddy, their cousins. They're talking about shooting black folks and brown folks. They're talking about shooting us down. And so what I'm saying, the fact is that those type of things, that we have to have more blacks, African-American minorities stand up.
So the second thing we want people to understand from reading your book is that police officers have qualified immunity.
Qualified immunity.
Because their code is...
Ain't but one story told anyway.
To be tried by 12.
And carried by 6.
And carried by 6.
And it ain't but one story told. And that's
your story.
Because that person dead.
Because the dead can't speak.
Dead can't speak. They actually talk to each other in the academy.
Well, what's the third thing you want people to know? What's the third thing you want people to know?
Is to know the rules.
Know the road.
Know the
rules of the road.
And know the limitations. And know your limitations. You can't get, first of all, when they pull you over, hit your dome lights, put your hand on 10-2 on your wheel, let your window down, always have your ID, your ID set in your glove, and right on your console here, and set up on your dashboard. And if you got to reach for something, tell the officer and say, look here, don't say nothing. Put it on your dashboard, and in your driver's license, and your insurance on your dash, and sit there and let him come in and talk to you. Don't move. Because women say, ain't but one story told out there in those streets. And that's the one that's alive.
I know what you're talking about.
Because you get out there talking about people cursing, you talking cursing to the police, I talking crazy to them. All you doing is taking your own life in hand.
Yeah. Well, I had an experience when I was in grad school in Rochester, New York. I'm from South Carolina originally. And man, it snows in upstate New York. I was living in Rochester. So I messed around and got caught out there in a snowstorm and ended up going down a one-way street the wrong way. And the cops saw me and stopped me. And so when the cops stopped me, he came up to my car. I was driving a little Volkswagen. I had my hands up like this. I had my hands up where you could see them. I don't, officer, I don't mean you no harm. And I'm praying that you don't mean me any harm. And so when the officer came up, he smiled. And he said, sir, why do you have your hands up like that? I said, well,
I don't want to be a mistake.
I don't want to be a mistake. I don't want to be no mistake. And he actually laughed. He said, where you from? I said, well, I'm from South Carolina originally. He said, oh, well, we don't do those kind of things in New York. You know what I told that police officer? I said, officer, I don't mean no harm, but I understand what you're saying. But I also understand that everything is south of the South Pole. Because when you're dealing with those other people, man, everything is south.
So I'm saying, but even a greater thing, even I done told you about all of that, but the thing that I was that's grounded me more than anything else is that God had called me for this position. I remember.
Go ahead.
I remember after I wound up, they tried to set me up. And they did set me up. And they wound up, set me up, brought charges against me. And I was at home. And I was laying on my couch. And all of a sudden, something jumped right in it was set in the middle of my chest. I couldn't move. I said, man, what's going on? I couldn't see what was there. But I knew something was there in my chest, on top, straddling me. Then I said, Lord, have mercy. When I said that, it let me go. And man, you talking about that time, I was so scared, I took my head under the cover. What's going on here? And so
this is where the inspiration.
This is where the inspiration came in.
For you to write.
The inspiration came in and let God know it wasn't about me. Yeah. That He had chose me to do this journey. That I was chosen to go through this process.
In order to write the book.
That's right. God had took it. So and the thing was, so I fell asleep that night. And I woke up in the morning, and there were white roses all over me. And I said, man, I jumped up. It scared me. I was like, I died or something. The rose all on me.
Thought you had died and gone to heaven. Huh?
So I got up and I got the rose. I called my sister. I said, I done woke up and it's white roses all over me. And she said, son, God had just sent His angels to visit you. And so I got up and picked up the roses and put them in a bag and put them up in the closet. So a few days later on, I had a couple of friends of mine who came by, and I was going to show them to them. The roses was gone. Wasn't there. So I said, man, it scared me.
But an outline of the book
outline
had been given to you.
For hell, the glory. And from that from the time after I got from the time they went through, they came in, stuck charges on me. Say I had took $100,000 out of the bank and all that. I said, no. First of all, if I did all that, where's the council checks? Where's all the checks and where's all this at you have against me? There wasn't any. But the thing is, they had a judge that was getting ready to railroad me. So they had a trial. They set up in a trial. I come sit at the trial, got my attorney, set the trial. And the jury, and one of the jurors looked at me and called me an MF from the jury box. I told my attorney, I said, man, the judge just called me an MF from the jury box. He got up and told the judge. And the judge said, don't y'all do that. Don't y'all do that. That's inappropriate. I said, oh, man, this train is on the track. She's supposed to have been dismissed, the whole jury, and got a new jury. But that's not the way it was going. That train was on the track. I knew then that ain't nothing I could do to improve my innocence. And so by that time, nothing I could do.
You knew that you were getting ready to be railroaded.
I was getting ready to get railroaded.
Be railroaded.
And so the fact is, so now then but when it came in, they said, well, if you admit to being guilty, then we'll let you go to your probation. I said, oh, no. What I will do is, if you let me go now, I promise not to sue you for no more than $10 million. So I said, let's go. So they went on, and they went on through. All the evidence it was, and they couldn't find nothing against me, but yet they found me guilty. So I just went on in. And then finally, after about a month or two, they came back and said, well, if you plead guilty, we're going to give you shock probation and let you go. I said, no, I tell you what, if you pull all these charges, clear my record, then what I will do, I'll sue you for $20 million instead of $30 million. So let's go. So from that point on, but finally, I had an attorney. God blessed me to have enough pretty good attorneys that cost me a lot of money. And so finally, I was waiting on appeal. And that night, I was sitting in my bunk. And as I was sitting in my bunk, I was looking up at the roof. And woke up, the whole roof of the cell block opened up like I was at a movie picture show. Within that movie, I was in my sister's living room. And within that living room was a man standing with his back to him, tall, had a white robe on, like they did back in the Egyptian days. White robe, across his shoulder, and a brown staff in his right hand. I could only see the silhouette of his back. My sister was sitting at the table, and on that deal, she had all our pictures on the dinette set. And the man said to her, what are you worried about? You see him? He'll be home soon. Then it said, shh, it just closed up. Man, I got up, I threw my head up on the deal. I threw my head up under the cover. I was scared, whoa, Lord, what's going on? I covered up. I didn't know what was going on. And so, but it scared me. And so 2 weeks later, they came and said, Perry, you're going home. Your case has been overturned. But nobody but God was showing it to me. Nobody but God. My case was overturned. And they brought me back. And now I knew that time it wasn't nobody but God. I had to go through this, but he chose me to go through this. I had the things that I went through, and he gave me the strength and endurance to sustain me to go through, because I know, and only let me know what God can do for you. If you allow God to use you, if you allow God to place His Spirit in you, and you believe, you have faith.
And if you're willing to go through,
if you're willing to go through,
to be able to break through.
If you're willing to be obedient. willing to be obedient. And so therefore, and went through, and that's when I came through, God gave me, when I was sitting in my bed, right at night, in the bunk, in prison, at 3 o'clock in the morning. He wouldn't let me write nothing during the day. He'd wake me up at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm writing. I'm just seeing, I'm not even aware of what I'm writing, I'm just writing. I'm writing this book. At 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm just writing. And then sometimes I would see things standing up at the foot of my bed. And man, I'm scared of Lord. I'm covering my head up, but it was standing in my bed, and I'm saying, Lord have mercy. I'm gonna cover my head up. But it was the Lord who was talking to me. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about the will of God. And all I had to do is be obedient and let God use me. And that's what he did. And so he said me go through, but he brought me through on the other side. And yet I said, hey, I stand. So I had to write this book. And when I came out, the book was
as an expression of the will of God.
I had the will of God. I had the book. I had to write. So, in other words, he put me in there. I sat on this book for a year without doing anything with it. But I've never had peace of mind till I got to put the book in publish. And with this book, so not only that, he showed me that he would let me go through all that, but he brought me on the other side. But it wasn't about me. It was about the will of God. God's grace and God's mercy, how he brought me through. But that's how God used you. He used people to do his will. And so, and since that time, I feel good about it. I said thankful he chose me. And I said, but I hope I don't think it's going through too many more of those things, because it was a long time. That's a lot going through a lot of them, but it was a blessing.
Well, I tell you what, Constable, we bless you, and we're praying with you for the success of the book, and we thank you for being on The Voice today to share your story. And you can purchase the book on Amazon or any other major bookstore, Barnes & Noble, and you've been listening to the life story of a police officer who experienced the denigration and the degradation of the blue code as it relates to not only policing, but even in relationship to you being a black person as a police professional. So thank you for viewing the show today, and God bless you, and keep your paper in your car and Houston clean.
and always remember, let God use you.
Yeah.
Let God use you.
Amen.
Be willing to let God use you.